The wind cut through the empty street, like a blade that winter night, carrying the salt tang of the harbor and the distant groan of buoy bells. Under the pale yellow glow of a street lamp that had seen better decades, a woman stood at the rusted railing, her fingers wrapped around the cold metal as if it were the only thing tethering her to this world. Below, the black water moved with a rhythm that seemed to whisper promises, promises of silence, of ending, of finally not having to wake up and remember who she used to be. Rachel Morrison didn't hear the footsteps at first. The wind was too loud. Or maybe her thoughts were. But then a voice, soft and steady, cut through both. Not today. She turned, startled, her hollow eyes meeting those of a man holding the hand of a small girl. He wasn't looking at the water. He was looking at her, and in his gaze was something she hadn't seen in so long she'd forgotten its name. Recognition. Not of who she was, but of what this moment was. The waves crashed against the pier posts below. The wind pulled at her tattered coat. The little girl, maybe 7, with dark hair escaping from beneath a knit cap, looked up at Rachel with eyes that held no judgment, only curiosity. The man didn't move closer, didn't reach out. He just stood there, holding his daughter's hand, waiting. "The water's cold tonight," he said finally, as if they were discussing the weather over coffee. "Colder than it looks." Rachel's grip on the railing loosened slightly. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way he said it, not as a warning or a plea, but as a simple fact shared between two people who understood what cold really meant. Rachel Morrison had once known warmth. 32 years old, though the streets had aged her face by a decade, she had once stood in front of third graders at Hillside Elementary, teaching them about butterflies and multiplication tables. She had once had a husband named David, who brought her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings and called her his morning star. She had once had a small house with yellow shutters and a garden where tomatoes grew fat and red in the summer sun. The cancer took David first, slowly, expensively. The medical bills took everything else. First the savings, then the house, then the car. Her in-laws, Margaret and Robert, had never approved of her too young for their son. They'd said, too naive. When David died, they collected his life insurance as beneficiaries. He'd never updated the policy after marriage and cut her off completely. "You have your whole life ahead of you," Margaret had said at the funeral, as if that were a comfort rather than a curse. The teaching job went next. Not officially, because of the grief, the principal wouldn't dare put that in writing. But when you show up to work with yesterday's clothes and hollow eyes, when you can't stop your hands from shaking during story time, when a parent complains about the teacher who seems unstable, the outcome is inevitable. The union couldn't help. "Budget cuts," they said. "Last hired, first fired." The shelters came after that. First the good ones, where they still called you by name, and the soup was hot. Then the overcrowded ones, where you learned to sleep with your shoes on and your few possessions clutched to your chest. Then the spaces under bridges, in doorways, wherever the police wouldn't move you along before dawn. She had developed a habit of making herself small, invisible. If you don't take up space, people can't resent you for existing. If you don't make eye contact, they can't see how far you've fallen. She moved through the city like a ghost, convinced she had expired in society's eyes past her use-by date, no longer suitable for consumption. Standing at that railing wasn't a new thought. She'd been there 3 weeks ago, 2 months ago. But tonight, the emptiness felt different. Heavier. Final. Like all the air had been sucked out of the world and she was the only one who noticed. The man holding the little girl's hand was Ethan Crawford, though Rachel didn't know that yet. 36 years old, with calloused hands that spoke of honest work and eyes that held their own catalog of loss. He fixed air conditioners in the summer, heating systems in the winter, and whatever else broke in between. His fingernails always had a crescent of grease beneath them that no amount of scrubbing could remove. But his daughter Mia never minded when those hands braided her hair or checked her math homework. Mia was 7, would be 8 in spring. She had her mother's delicate features but her father's steadiness, a combination that made her seem both younger and older than her years. She could read 2 grades above her level and had a way of looking at people that made them feel truly seen, a gift and a burden for one so young. They had been walking home from Ethan's late shift, the repair shop staying open until 9 to catch the after-work crowd. His boss, Mr. Daniels, was good about letting him bring Mia when the babysitter fell through, which happened more often than either of them liked to admit. She would do her homework in the break room, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and instant coffee, looking up occasionally to watch her father through the window as he worked. 4 years ago, Ethan's wife Claire had been driving home from her nursing shift at the hospital when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact killed her instantly, a small mercy, the police said, as if any part of it could be merciful. Ethan had been home with 3-year-old Mia, reading her a bedtime story about brave princesses and kind dragons, when the knock came at the door. Since then, he had been both mother and father, a role he never felt quite qualified for but couldn't afford to fail at. He learned to French braid hair from YouTube videos, to sew buttons and hem pants, to have answers for why mommy couldn't come back even though she had promised to always be there. He and Mia had developed their own language of survival, built on small promises and kept words. The main one, repeated every morning as he walked her to school: "We don't leave each other behind." The bag in his hand contained day-old bread from the bakery that sold yesterday's goods for half price after 8 o'clock. Dinner would be that bread with peanut butter, maybe some canned soup if the pantry wasn't bare. Payday was still 3 days away, and the electric bill had taken more than expected. But Mia never complained. She had learned early that some questions didn't have good answers, so it was better not to ask them. They had been walking past the harbor, taking the long way home because Mia liked to see the boats, when Ethan noticed the woman at the railing. Something in her posture, the way she leaned forward slightly, the stillness that wasn't peaceful but desperate, he recognized it. He had stood at his own railing once, metaphorically speaking, 6 months after Claire died. Mia had been at his mother's house, and he had sat in his truck in the garage with the engine running, garage door closed, for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes before he turned it off and went inside to vomit and cry and live another day. "Daddy," Mia whispered, tugging his hand. "That lady looks sad." "Yeah, baby," he said softly. "She does." Without hesitation, Mia reached into their bag and pulled out one of the small dinner rolls. Before Ethan could stop her, she had walked up to Rachel, extending the bread like an offering. "Are you hungry?" Mia asked, her voice carrying the simple directness that only children possess. "It's still good. The lady at the store said so." Rachel looked down at the child, then at the bread, then back at the child. The roll was still soft, probably from that morning's batch. Such a small thing. Bread. But the gesture, the assumption that hunger was the problem, and sharing was the solution, pierced through Rachel's carefully constructed armor. Her hand shook as she reached for it. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. Mia smiled, satisfied that she had helped. She looked back at her father, who had moved closer but still kept a respectful distance. "It's a cold night to be out," Ethan said carefully. "We're headed home. Just a few blocks from here. You could," he paused, choosing his words. "You could come, get warm. Just for tonight. No questions. No strings. Just warm." Rachel looked at him, searching for the catch. There was always a catch. Men who offered shelter wanted something. Everyone wanted something. But this man just looked tired, holding his daughter's hand, offering nothing more than what he said. "I don't." Rachel started, then stopped. "What? Don't deserve it? Don't need it? Don't trust it?" "The couch pulls out," Ethan said, as if she had already agreed. "It's not much, but it's better than out here. And Mia makes pretty good hot chocolate, don't you, kiddo?" "With marshmallows," Mia added seriously. "The little ones, not the big ones. The big ones are too big." For the first time in months, Rachel felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, but breaking open. Like ice beginning to thaw. She let go of the railing. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days but worse ones too. The stairs creaked under their feet, and the hallway smelled of other people's dinners: curry from 3B, something with garlic from 3D. Ethan unlocked 3 locks with practiced efficiency, while Mia held Rachel's hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Inside, the space was small but clean. clearly a home where everything had its place because there wasn't room for it not to. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A row of library books sat on the coffee table. A photo of a woman with Mia's eyes smiled from the mantel, surrounded by battery-operated candles because real ones were too dangerous with a child around. "Bathroom's down the hall," Ethan said, setting down his keys in a bowl by the door. "There are clean towels in the cabinet if you want to shower. Water takes a minute to get hot, but it gets there." Rachel stood in the doorway, unsure how to exist in a space that wasn't public, wasn't temporary, wasn't hostile. The warmth of the apartment made her realize how cold she had been, how long she had been cold. Mia was already in the kitchen, pulling out a pot for hot chocolate. She had to stand on a step stool to reach the stove, but she moved with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. "I'll make some soup too," Ethan said, not looking at Rachel directly, giving her space to adjust. "Nothing fancy. Campbell's finest. But it's hot." Rachel found herself in the bathroom, looking at her reflection for the first time in weeks. The woman staring back was a stranger, hollow cheeks, tangled hair, eyes that had forgotten how to hope. She turned on the shower, and when the hot water finally came, she stood under it and cried silent, body-shaking sobs that she muffled with her hand over her mouth so they wouldn't hear. When she emerged, clean, and wearing the same clothes because they were all she had, Mia was setting the table for 3. Such a simple act, but it included her. A place at the table. A bowl, a spoon, an assumption of belonging, even temporarily. The soup was too salty and the hot chocolate too sweet, but Rachel ate and drank like it was a feast. Mia chattered about school, about her teacher Mrs. Patterson, who had a pet turtle named Fred, about the book she was reading where the children found a secret garden. Ethan ate quietly, occasionally correcting Mia's wilder elaborations, but mostly just watching his daughter be kind to a stranger. That first night, Rachel slept on the pulled-out couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like fabric softener, a luxury she had forgotten existed. She woke several times, disoriented, expecting to be moved along, to be cold, to be anywhere but safe. Each time, she heard the quiet sounds of the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of a clock, Ethan's soft snoring from down the hall, and remembered where she was. In the morning, she tried to leave before they woke, but Mia was already at the kitchen table, eating cereal and reading the back of the box. "There's coffee," she said, as if Rachel leaving hadn't been a possibility. "Daddy makes it too strong. But there's milk in the fridge." And so Rachel stayed another day. Then another. She kept her distance at first, trying to take up as little space as possible. She cleaned obsessively, as if she could earn her keep through invisible labor. She spoke only when spoken to, ate only what was offered, existed in the margins of their life like a footnote. But Mia had other plans. She drew Rachel into small activities with the persistence of water wearing down stone. They cooked together, Mia standing on her stool, Rachel remembering recipes from her old life. They watched morning cartoons, Mia explaining the complex relationships between animated characters with absolute seriousness. They watered the small herb garden Ethan kept on the fire escape, Mia naming each plant like they were pets. There was a rhythm to their days that Rachel found herself falling into despite her better judgment. Ethan left early for work. Mia went to school. And Rachel was alone in the apartment that wasn't hers, surrounded by a life that wasn't hers, pretending for a few hours that maybe it could be. She found herself organizing things, not rearranging, just making sense of what was there. She fixed the wobbly table leg with a folded piece of cardboard. She mended a tear in Mia's favorite stuffed animal, with tiny, careful stitches. She made grocery lists that stretched dollars into meals, remembering tricks from her early married days when money was tight but hope was abundant. Sometimes in the afternoon before they came home, she would sit on the floor of Mia's room and look at the homework worksheets scattered on the small desk. Math problems and spelling words, science projects about the water cycle. Her hands would itch to help, to teach, to be useful in the way she once was. She remembered the joy of watching understanding dawn on a child's face, that moment when confusion became clarity. One evening, About 2 weeks into this strange new existence, Mia was struggling with her homework. Fractions, the bane of every third grader's existence. Ethan was trying to help, but his explanation was making it worse, turning simple into complicated. "Can I?" Rachel asked quietly, the first time she had volunteered anything. Ethan looked up, surprised, then nodded, sliding over to make room. Rachel picked up a piece of bread from dinner, tore it into pieces. "Okay, so this is one whole, right? And if I tear it in half?" She proceeded to turn fractions into something tangible, something real. Within 10 minutes, Mia was solving problems on her own, beaming with pride. "You're a teacher," Ethan said. "It wasn't a question." "Was," Rachel corrected, but for the first time, the word didn't feel like a death sentence. The peace couldn't last. It never did. The world had a way of finding you, even when you tried to disappear. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything shifted. Rachel had ventured out to the grocery store 3 blocks away. A list from Ethan in her pocket and cash he had insisted she take. She kept her head down, moved quickly, efficiently, but in the cereal aisle, she heard her name. "Rachel? Rachel Morrison?" She turned to find Patricia Henley, a parent from Hillside Elementary. Patricia, whose daughter Emma had been in Rachel's last class. Patricia, who had been on the PTA and had opinions about everything and everyone. "It is you," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular tone of scandal disguised as concern. "We heard you were, well, that you had some troubles." "Well," Rachel mumbled something non-committal, tried to move past, but Patricia wasn't done. "You know, there were rumors about why you really left Hillside. Something about missing funds from the classroom supply money. It wasn't true. None of it was true." But Rachel couldn't find the words to defend herself. She just stood there, holding a box of cereal, while Patricia's voice carried through the store, drawing looks, creating whispers. By the time Rachel got back to the apartment, the damage was done. In a neighborhood like this, gossip traveled faster than light. By evening, Ethan had heard 3 different versions of the story, each one worse than the last. He didn't say anything at first, but Rachel could feel the shift, the questions he wasn't asking, the distance he was carefully maintaining. Mia, bless her, remained oblivious, chattering about her day, showing Rachel a drawing of a butterfly she had made. That night, Rachel heard Ethan on the phone in his bedroom, voice low but tense. "I don't know, Mom. I've got Mia to think about. No, she seems fine, but if what people are saying is true, I can't have someone like that around my daughter." Rachel didn't hear the rest. She was already packing her few belongings into the plastic bag she had arrived with. The financial crisis that hit Ethan the next day was unrelated but felt like cosmic punishment. The big repair job he had been counting on, a contract to service all the units in a new apartment complex, fell through. The developer had gone with a cheaper company, probably one that hired under the table, paid below minimum wage. 3 months of projected income gone. The electric bill was overdue. Rent was coming up. The school had sent home a notice about Mia's field trip fee. When he came home that Friday evening, exhausted and defeated, Rachel was gone. Just a note on the clean kitchen table. "Thank you for everything. I'm sorry for the trouble. Take care of Mia." The rain started that night. One of those cold, relentless March rains that felt more like November. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the note, while Mia stood in Rachel's spot by the window, watching the street below. "Why did she leave?" Mia asked, her small voice cutting through the sound of rain on glass. "I don't know, baby. Did we do something wrong?" Number. "Sometimes people just have to go. But we don't leave each other behind," you said. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. The bus station at midnight was exactly as depressing as every movie had ever made it look. Fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick, plastic chairs designed to be uncomfortable, the smell of industrial disinfectant fighting a losing battle against humanity. Rachel sat in the corner, her plastic bag at her feet, waiting for the 12:45 to anywhere that wasn't here. She had enough money for a ticket to the next city. where she knew no one and no one knew her. A fresh start, or at least a fresh ending. She didn't hear him approach. But suddenly, Ethan was sitting beside her, rain dripping from his jacket, Mia asleep in his arms. She wouldn't go to bed, he said by way of explanation. Said we had to find you. Rachel couldn't look at them. You heard what people are saying. I heard what Patricia Henley is saying. That woman once tried to get the library to ban Harry Potter. I don't put much stock in her version of truth. It's not all lies, Rachel said quietly. I did take money. Just not the way she makes it sound. Ethan shifted Mia in his arms, her head finding that perfect spot on his shoulder that children always seem to know. Tell me. So Rachel did. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. There was a boy in my class. Marcus. Smart kid. Loved to read. Always asking questions. But he started coming to school tired, unfocused. Turned out his mom was working 3 jobs, and he was watching his younger siblings at night. No time for homework, no quiet place to study. Then he got sick, really sick. Pneumonia that wouldn't go away because they couldn't afford the good antibiotics. Just the basic ones from the free clinic. She paused, remembering Marcus's face, the way he tried so hard to stay awake during story time. I had some savings. Not much, but some. From before. I paid for the medicine, for a tutor to help him catch up, for the after-school program so he'd have somewhere safe to go. I told myself it was just a loan to myself, that I'd replace the money. But then David got sicker, and the bills started coming, and I never could. That's not stealing, Ethan said firmly. The school board didn't see it that way. Misappropriation of personal funds for student welfare without proper authorization. They couldn't prove I took classroom money, but they could prove I'd overstepped boundaries. It was enough to let me go quietly. They sat in silence for a moment. The bus station's fluorescent hum, the only sound. My turn, Ethan said finally. 6 months after Claire died, I almost gave up. Had it all planned out. Mia would be better off with my mom, I told myself. She had a stable home, money in the bank, time to be there for her. What did I have? A 2-bedroom apartment and hands that only knew how to fix machines, not hearts. He adjusted Mia again, his hand protective on her back. I sat in my truck in the garage with the engine running. For 10 minutes, maybe 15. I kept thinking about this promise Claire and I made when Mia was born, that we wouldn't leave each other behind. It was about us as a couple, but also about us as a family. And I realized that keeping that promise meant staying. Even when staying was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Rachel finally looked at him, seeing her own pain reflected in his eyes. The thing is, Ethan continued, I think we're all just trying not to leave each other behind. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we run because we think we're protecting people from us. But maybe the brave thing is staying and letting people decide for themselves if we're worth the trouble. Mia stirred in his arms, opening her eyes sleepily. Seeing Rachel, she reached out one small hand. You came back, she said, as if it had never been in doubt. I haven't, Rachel started. But Mia interrupted. We made your bed already. With the good blanket. The one that's really soft. Rachel looked at this child who had already lost one mother figure, who was offering her heart again despite the risk. She looked at Ethan, who had every reason to protect himself and his daughter from more loss but was choosing not to. The 12:45 bus to anywhere arrived, wheezed to a stop, opened its doors. A few people got on. The driver looked at Rachel, waiting. She didn't move. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. Not today? Ethan asked softly, echoing his words from that first night. Not today, Rachel agreed. A month later, spring had finally wrestled control from winter. The harbor didn't look as black, and the wind carried warmth instead of just salt. Rachel worked part-time at the local library now, shelving books and helping with the after-school reading program. It didn't pay much, but it was enough. More importantly, it was a start. She also volunteered as a tutor 3 evenings a week at the community center. Word had gotten around, the good kind of word. The kind that said she was the teacher who could make fractions make sense, who could turn reluctant readers into bookworms, who remembered what it was like to struggle and didn't judge. The apartment was still small, still cramped. But it had adjusted to hold 3 instead of 2. Rachel had her own corner now, with a small dresser Ethan had fixed up from a yard sale and a reading lamp Mia had picked out because it looks like sunshine. She still slept on the pull-out couch. But there were plans, vague, tentative plans, for maybe finding a bigger place when the lease was up. A place where everyone had their own room but still chose to gather in the kitchen for hot chocolate that was too sweet and soup that was too salty. It was a Thursday afternoon, unseasonably warm. Mia was doing homework at the kitchen table, her tongue poking out in concentration. Ethan was on the small balcony, fixing a neighbor's radio for a few extra dollars. Rachel was making tea. The routine of it soothing in its simplicity. The sun slanted through the window, casting long shadows that should have reminded her of that night at the harbor but didn't. Instead, they just looked like shadows, nothing more or less. "Rachel," Mia said suddenly, looking up from her worksheet. "Is family spelled with one L or 2? "Just one," Rachel said, then spelled it out. "Family." "That's what I thought," Mia said, going back to her writing. "I'm writing about my family for school. Is it okay if I include you?" Rachel's hand stilled on the teacup. She looked at Ethan, who had stopped working on the radio and was watching them through the balcony door. He gave a small nod, a smile that was part encouragement, part something else that neither of them had words for yet. "If you want to," Rachel said carefully. "I do," Mia said with the certainty that children possess when they've decided something important. "You're part of us now." Later, as the sun was setting and they were all on the balcony, Ethan in the old lawn chair, Mia on his lap, Rachel leaning against the railing, but facing them this time, not the drop Ethan made one of his jokes that weren't really jokes. "Still thinking about it?" he asked, meaning the harbor, meaning the darkness, meaning all the railings in the world. "Not today," Rachel said. The response automatic now. "Ritual. Promise. Not any day," she added, and meant it. The camera of this story, if there were one, would pull back now. It would show the 3 of them on that small balcony. The harbor in the distance but not threatening. Just part of the landscape. It would show the other balconies with other families, other struggles, other small victories. It would show the sun setting but also the promise that it would rise again, that tomorrow would come, that they would meet it together. It would show that sometimes salvation doesn't come from grand gestures or dramatic reversals. Sometimes it comes from a child offering bread to a stranger. Sometimes it comes from someone saying "not today" at exactly the right moment. Sometimes it comes from being seen, being believed, being given a place at the table even when you have nothing to bring to it. The city hummed its evening song sirens and car horns, and children playing and lives being lived. Somewhere, someone else was standing at their own railing, literal or metaphorical. Somewhere, someone else was making the choice to reach out or pull back, to stay or go, to trust or close off. But here, in this small apartment with its creaking floors and 2 thin walls, 3 people who had each known the weight of loss had found something they hadn't been looking for. Not healing, exactly, the wounds were still there, would always be there. But something better than healing. The knowledge that wounds didn't disqualify you from love, that broken things could still be whole, that families could be built from found pieces, and those foundations could be just as strong as any other. Mia's homework essay would say it simply, in the way children do. "My family is me, and my dad and Rachel. We take care of each other. We don't leave each other behind." The teacher would probably correct the grammar, add a comma here or there. But she wouldn't correct the sentiment because it was perfect as it was. A thesis statement for a life rebuilt. A promise kept. A future that suddenly seemed possible in a way it hadn't before. The stars came out, one by one, barely visible through the city's glow, but there nonetheless. Rachel pointed out Orion to Mia, remembering how she used to do this with her students during the autumn science unit. Ethan mentioned that his father had taught him the constellations during long nights fishing, back when the world was simpler, or at least seemed that way. They stayed on the balcony until Mia started yawning, until the air grew too cool, until it was time to go inside and continue the beautiful, ordinary business of living. As they gathered the cups and cushions, as they moved through the ritual of bedtime teeth brushing and story reading and goodnight kisses, there was a sense of something settled, something decided without words. This was home now. Not the apartment itself, though that was part of it, but the three of them, together, choosing each day to stay, to try, to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. And if not better, then at least shared. The harbor would always be there. The railing would always be there. The darkness that sometimes crept in at the edges would always be there. But so would this. A kitchen table set for three. A child's laughter. A man who knew how to fix broken things. A woman remembering how to teach again. How to hope again. How to stay. Not today, they said to the darkness. Not any day, they meant. And in the morning, when the sun came through the kitchen window, and Mia spilled orange juice on her homework, and Ethan burned the toast, and Rachel laughed, actually laughed at the beautiful chaos of it all, the promise renewed itself without anyone having to say it out loud. They didn't leave each other behind. They wouldn't. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything.